everybody. I'm going to be playing the Dead Frontier Outbreak games. I tried this before, didn't work out. Hopefully this time it will. Basically, these are like a text form story. A guy tells the story, tells it in texts, and narrates it. And then you have to pick a choice that it gives you. Some choices will change the story a bit. Others can get you killed, so you gotta be careful. Anyway, let's get started.
It started as a normal day, just like any other. I took a shower and grabbed a quick cup of coffee before heading out of the front door and waving goodbye to my loving wife. I jumped on board the bus, sat down, turned on my MP3 player, and promptly entered my usual daydream state. I finally arrived at my office building, headed up the 10th floor, and sat down at my desk to see a huge pile of paperwork. I sighed and got started. A scream coming from down the hall broke my concentration. I considered going to see what it was, but the thought quickly passed. Probably just another hysterical secretary overreacting to a spider. Just as I started getting back to work, something else grabbed my attention. I peered out the window into the street below, and to my astonishment, saw a scene of utter chaos. People fighting, even killing each other for seemingly no reason. By this time, some of my coworkers had gotten up from their desks and joined me in staring out the window.
Okay, turn on the radio built into my cell phone. Go down the hall to look at the TV in the common room. Sit back down and continue my work, or go and grab another cup of coffee. I'd say turn on the radio.
The radio began blurting out all kinds of information. It said that a new breed of virus had been discovered, one that would change its victims into a homicidal maniac. This virus was highly contagious and spreading rapidly. Their advice was to stay where I was, and that if I were to encounter an infected person, I should try to destroy their brain.
Okay, basically, quick feedback, or fact, or whatever. I am currently wearing cotton in my ears to protect my hearing. I don't have any earplugs, so I gotta stick with cotton. Okay, next.
At this point, I felt myself entering a state of mild shock. It was obvious that whatever was going on was serious, and that a significant percentage of the population were going to be killed or wounded over the course of the next few days. My thoughts quickly turned to my wife. Was she okay? What if these maniacs were near our home?
Okay, take out my cell phone and try to call my wife. Don't call, just go home and see if she's okay. Do neither and stay in the office building. Let's do this.
I knew that the phone lines would most likely be overwhelmed, so I decided not to waste time by calling. I headed straight home. I began to make my way through a series of corridors that lead to the elevator. On my way, I noticed a struggle out of the corner of my eye. I turned to see a disfigured man frantically clawing at and biting a young woman's leg. Blood was already pouring from her multiple wounds. The woman cried out for me to help her.
Attack the crazed man and try to find someone to help. Call 911 or leave the woman to her doom. Yeah. Sorry, but this probably seems to be the better choice.
I continued down the hallway, ignoring the woman's cries for help. She would have been infected, and it wasn't worth the risk.
Sorry, lady.
I arrived at the elevator, but to my dismay, it seemed many other people had the same idea. I heard a ping, and the elevator doors slid open. In a split second, the large crowd of office staff pushed and shoved their way into the tiny metal box.
Wait for another elevator, take the stairs, squeeze into the elevator with the others, or jump out the window. I would probably...
I quickly made my way down the stairs to the ground floor. Sure, I was a little out of breath, but at least I saved time and avoided a potentially lethal situation.
God, this thing is so laggy.
I eventually reached the ground floor and entered the lobby. The scene in front of me was one of extreme violence. The security team was desperately battling with a swarm of infected, and they appeared to be losing. I watched helplessly as a guard on the opposite side of the room was torn limb from limb. I noticed his gun lying on the floor just a few meters away from his dismembered corpse.
Okay, run across the room and try to get the gun, make a dash for the main exit, or leave the lobby and try to escape through the rear.
I managed to slip away without any infected noticing and proceeded quickly towards the rear exit. I made my way through several corridors towards the back of the building. As I approached the rear entrance, I spotted a hefty padlock across the bolt, making it practically impossible to open without a key. I cursed my bad luck and tried to figure out my next move. The janitor would have had the key, but reaching his office would have required going back towards the lobby.
Okay, go to the janitor's office and get the key, charge down the door, or search for a window to climb through. Okay.
I realized that breaking the door down would be impossible, and that heading back would be too dangerous. So I set about searching for another exit. I remembered that there was a small window in the male bathroom just a few doors down the corridor. I arrived at the bathroom door and pushed it open. Suddenly, I heard a bestial roar coming from further down the corridor. A dozen infected had spotted me and were now heading in my direction. I quickly entered the stall and spotted the window I was thinking of. However, to my dismay, it was much smaller than I had remembered. I thought that I would probably fit, but I knew it was going to be a very tricky maneuver.
Go straight through the window, hide in the cubicle, and hope the infected pass before trying the window. Or flood the bathroom before trying the window. Now let's just go through it.
Not wanting to waste time, I set about trying to squeeze through the window. A few awkward movements and a lot of pain later, I managed to force my way into the street, escaping the infected with only a few seconds to spare. I dropped from the window and landed on the pavement with a heavy thud. Looking up and down the quiet back street, I tried to decide what to do next. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that my best bet was to head to a main road and try to steal a vehicle or catch a lift. I jogged down the quiet street for a few hundred feet before stopping to catch my breath. I looked up briefly and saw a little girl wandering aimlessly in the middle of the road.
Walk up to her and see if she's okay. Call out to her or ignore her. I don't want to leave her if she's not infected.
I called out to the little girl. She slowly turned towards me before looking up, letting out a ghastly scream and charging towards me. My instincts told me that she was infected, and I immediately began to run in the opposite direction. Luckily, her legs simply weren't long enough to keep pace with me. Within a couple of minutes, she had lost my scent.
Okay, maybe that wasn't the best idea.
I eventually arrived at the main road. As I suspected, the scene wasn't pretty. In every direction, I could see people either trying to fight or flee from the numerous infected. An array of dismembered corpses already littered the streets. I suddenly felt nauseous, and within a few moments I was vomiting my breakfast all over the pavement. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve and looked up to see a bus driving down the street. The number was the same as the one I usually took home. There appeared to be a lot of people on board already, but I thought I might be able to squeeze in.
Try to flag down the bus, run into the middle of the road and force the bus to stop, or ignore the bus and continue on the street, down the street.
on the crowded bus probably wasn't a good idea. If someone on board were infected, then there would have been no escape. As I continued down the street, I noticed several groups of people. Just across the road was a group of men with rifles. They appeared to be having fun shooting the zombies rather than trying to escape. In the alley, I could just about see a group of teenage boys armed with a variety of makeshift melee weapons. A few meters from where I was standing, a paramedic and an armed police officer were helping a wounded man, and as I glanced over my shoulder, I saw a group of survivors from my office building, heading in the same direction. I decided that it was probably best to team up with other survivors.
Join the men with rifles, join the teenage boys, join the paramedic police officer and wounded man, or join your co-workers.
I jogged over to the group of my fellow co-workers. They seemed happy to see me.
This group is probably the best choice. None of them are injured, and since they know you, they are much less likely to leave you behind in a sticky situation.
I told the group that I thought we should try to find some transportation to get out of the city center. One of them suggested we go to the parking area a few blocks down. We quickly agreed to our strategy and made our way down the street. As we approached the car parking area, we noticed a few infected wandering idly around the entrance. There was no real way to avoid them.
God damn this. Suggest we try to run past them, suggest fighting them as a group. Distract them away from the entrance so the others can get through safely, or convince one of the others to distract them. Let's try running past.
We ran swiftly towards the parking area, ducking and weaving between the zombies. Unfortunately, one of us stumbled and fell to the ground with a definite thud. By the time the rest of us noticed, it was already too late. The zombies had him pinned and were now tearing away at his flesh. Without saying a word to one another, we continued on our way and left him to his fate. We eventually found a few different options for vehicles in which we could make our escape. On the far side of the parking area, we found a pair of road motorbikes. Closer to us was a four-wheel drive all-terrain Jeep, a large freight truck, and a convertible sports car.
Okay, suggest taking the motorbike, suggest taking the Jeep, suggest taking the freight truck, or suggest taking the sports car. Let's go with the Jeep.
I suggested that we take the Jeep, and the others quickly agreed. Having the ability to go off-road if necessary would be incredibly useful, especially since many roads would have been blocked with traffic, accidents, or zombies. We approached the Jeep and peered inside. To our dismay, we saw a pair of infected inside, desperately clawing at the windows in an attempt to escape.
Suggest pulling the zombies from the Jeep, or suggest trying another vehicle. This one might be a little dangerous, so let's go with another vehicle.
I made my suggestion, but the others didn't listen. They really wanted that Jeep, and a few zombies weren't going to stand in their way. The others immediately flung open the doors and started trying to drag the zombies out. However, without my help, they were having serious trouble, and it seemed like they would most likely end up dead if I didn't intervene.
Try to help them, leave them to it, and escape on one of the motorbikes, escape in the sports car, or escape in the freight truck. Let's take the car.
I headed towards the sports car and didn't look back. I climbed aboard my chosen vehicle and sped away from the car park onto the main street. By then the roads were littered with bodies and car wreckages. It was all I could do to avoid them. Everywhere I looked, I could see only scenes of carnage. It seemed that those not already infected were fighting a losing battle. My thoughts quickly turned to my wife. I tried to tell myself that she would be okay, but that didn't stop the horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. I knew I had to get home as soon as possible. In the distance, I could see a gas station with a few of the zombies on the forecourt. I quickly glanced down at the fuel gauge and saw that I only had about half a tank remaining.
Fill up at the pump, go into the attached convenience store and take supplies, or continue down the road without stopping.
I decided not to stop for gas or supplies due to the potential danger. Half a gas tank was more than enough to get home anyway.
Okay.
I continued down the road before turning onto the main highway out of town. However, it wasn't long before I noticed a mass of vehicles blocking the road ahead. The combined sound of all the honking, shouting, and screaming was deafening. Nobody had kept to their lanes, and cars were packed so closely together that not even a bicycle could squeeze through. The blockage extended so far down the road that it was literally impossible to discern what the cause was.
Wait patiently for the traffic jam to clear. Take the vehicle off-road and go around the blockage. I'd say turn around and find another route home.
I decided that there was no point in waiting for the traffic to clear, and that without the Jeep, driving off the road was just too dangerous. I headed back the way I came and turned off the highway at the first exit. I soon found a safer, albeit less direct route home. As I sped down the disturbingly quiet back road, my mind began to wander. Without the distraction of imminent danger, I began to remember the horrific scenes I had witnessed just an hour ago. Images of mangled corpses flashed before my eyes, and my head began to spin. I swerved onto the wrong side of the road, just as another vehicle pulled out from a concealed entrance. I braked sharply, but it was too late to avoid a collision. Amazingly, I wasn't seriously injured, but my ride was badly damaged.
See if the other driver is hurt. Try to steal the other driver's car. Try to repair the vehicle or carry on foot.
I walked over to the car and I opened the driver's door. He was unconscious but didn't seem to be badly wounded. As I wondered what to do next, I noticed 3 large bite marks on his upper arm and realized that it wouldn't be long before he became one of the infected. I decided to leave him and continue on foot.
Okay.
After a half an hour of walking, I began to recognize my surroundings and knew that I would soon be home. There were several different routes I could take.
Continue along the main road, follow the train line, take a shortcut through the cornfields, take a shortcut through the woods. Let's do the train line.
I decided to get off the main road, as it would undoubtedly be dangerous in such a heavily populated area. I decided to follow the train line instead, since it ran not far from my house and would be totally deserted. Sure enough, I didn't see another soul. I finally arrived in my neighborhood, exhausted. I knew that my house was just a little further down the street, but the area was swarming with the infected. Most of them seemed distracted by what few survivors remained, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they noticed me. I remembered about a small alleyway nearby, one that would take me most of the way home in relative safety. I entered the alley, and as expected, it seemed totally devoid of life. However, as I walked past a large dumpster, an infected old man stepped out of the shadows and tried to grab me.
Grab him by the neck and push him away. Grab his torso and push him away. Punch him in the face or throw him over your shoulder.
I grabbed him by the neck, realizing that he'd be unable to bite me. I pushed him away as hard as I could, and he stumbled backward. I had bought myself valuable time, but it wouldn't take long for the creature to regain its balance and come at me again. I turned to run back the way I had came, only to see that another group of them had followed and were now blocking my retreat.
Good.
My only hope was to try and get past the lone infected.
Grab a brick and throw it at his head. Grab a brick and hit him in the head with it when he gets close enough, or try to run past. Try the third option, run past him.
I scrambled to my feet and ran at him as fast as I could, narrowly escaping the infected's grasp and pushing him to one side. I had escaped, but more by luck than judgment. I sped down the alley and back onto the street. When I looked over my shoulder, there was no sign of my pursuers. I could see my house now, just 100 feet or so away. My heart sank when I saw yet another group of infected wandering aimlessly between me and my goal.
Try to sneak past them, try to run past them, try to go through the neighbor's rear gardens.
I decided that it was too dangerous to carry on down the street. I went around the back of one of the neighbors' houses and climbed over the fence into their garden. It was tiring, but I carried on scrambling over the fences until I got to my own backyard. As I approached the house, I noticed the glass in the back door had been smashed and the door left slightly ajar. I was terrified for my wife's safety.
Go straight indoors, go to the shed and find a weapon. We're probably gonna need a weapon.
I realized that whoever had broken into the house could still be in there, and without a weapon, I wouldn't be able to help my wife. I headed over to the shed and checked my pockets. Luckily, I still had my keys and was able to remove the padlock and open the door. Inside, there was a wide range of tools to choose from.
Take the chainsaw, take the sledgehammer, take the crowbar, take the hand axe. I would probably pick the crowbar.
I took the crowbar, knowing that it would be easy to swing indoors, yet still heavy enough to cave in a human skull. With my weapon in hand, I left the shed and walked back to my house. Before I could enter, I discovered why the back door had been left ajar. A teenage looter emerged from the house carrying my television, obviously intent on profiting from the crisis. When he saw me, he dropped the TV and pulled out a large kitchen knife. At that moment, I couldn't tell which one of us was more afraid.
Attack the looter or let him go. If he's just a kid, I don't want to hurt him, so...
I told the looter that I wasn't going to hurt him, and that he could take the TV and go. He didn't bother to pick it back up. Instead, he ran over to the nearby fence and climbed over into the neighbor's garden. Having dealt with the looter, I walked in through the back door. I was relieved to finally be safely indoors, but I couldn't rest yet. Not until I was certain my wife was okay.
Search the house for her, lock the back door, barricade the back door. Let's search the house. I don't want to waste time.
I had wasted enough time already, and wasn't about to waste any more. I immediately started looking for my wife. I began searching the ground floor for my wife. As I came into the living room, I saw that John from next door was standing there. He had his back to me, and was clearly oblivious to my presence. His shirt was covered in red stains.
Attack him with your weapon, see if he's okay, back away slowly, and hope he doesn't notice you. He may or may not be infected. Nevertheless, I
decided it was best not to disturb him, and carefully backed away. If he had noticed me, he certainly didn't show it. As I went to go upstairs, I noticed a note had been left for me by the front door. I recognized my wife's handwriting immediately. The note said that she couldn't wait for me any longer, and that she was going to pack her bags and take the car to her parents' house in the countryside. As I read the note, my heart sank. I prayed that she would be able to make it to her parents in one piece. But knowing how hard it had been for me to get here, I couldn't help but wonder if she was still alive. When I realized I may never see her again, I began to feel tears rolling down my cheek.
Okay. Now, these choices lead to one of two endings. Leave the house and head for the countryside, or continue searching the house. I'd say continue searching the house.
I pulled pulled myself together and resolved to keep searching. I needed to make sure the house was secure before planning my next move.
Excuse me.
As I climbed the stairs, I heard an odd shuffling noise coming from my bedroom. I didn't know if it was my wife, a looter, or another of the infected.
Burst in, weapon ready, knock on the door and ask if who's in there, or slowly open the door and enter cautiously.
I kicked the door open and charged in with my weapon raised, ready to kill whatever was on the other side. The scene that greeted me will haunt my nightmares for years to come. My beautiful wife was pinned on the floor, desperately trying to fight off one of the infected. She could barely keep the creature at bay, and if I didn't act immediately, she would surely die.
Hit the infected on the head, run away, kick the infected off her before attacking.
I ran at the infected and kicked it in the face with all my might. It was enough to get the beast away from my wife, and I was able to quickly finish the job without the risk of hitting her by mistake. I was finally reunited with my wife. I dropped the weapon and held her as tightly as I could. In that moment, I was happier than I had ever been, yet the feeling would not last long. I asked her if she was okay, and she showed me her hand. Blood dripped from several bite marks on her fingers. I didn't know if she would become infected or not, or even how much longer she had. She sobbed as I struggled to decide what to do.
God damn it. Take her with you anyway, cut off her fingers and take her with you. Leave her or kill her. Let's be cautious. I don't want to kill her.
I knew I had to do something and do it quickly. If I could stop the spread of the infection, I might just be able to save her life. We ran down to the kitchen, took a clean meat cleaver from the knife rack, and tied an improvised tourniquet around her wrist. Within seconds it was over, and I was carefully dressing the wounds with bandages from our first aid kit. I didn't know if she would survive or not, but at least now we had hope. My wife and I spent some time discussing what to do next. We realized that we couldn't stay in the house forever, as it was just too dangerous this close to civilization. We decided that our best bet was to load up the car with food and supplies, and then head for her parents' house out in the country. I made sure the house was secure, dragged the corpses down to the basement, and then helped my wife get everything ready. She looked pale and weak, but it didn't seem like she would turn, at least not for a while yet. By the time everything was ready, it was already nightfall, so we decided to spend one more night at home before hitting the road. I don't think either of us slept that night, but it was better than traveling in the dark. We left at dawn.
To be continued. Survived the day, yes. Saved your wife, yes. Okay, your tactics are a rank A. You have a solid understanding of zombie outbreaks, and your survival skills are far above average. You'd probably survive a real outbreak. Compassion rank A. The outbreak has given you the chance to show your true bravery and heroic nature. The well-being of others is your primary concern. Okay. This has been Outbreak Part 1. I will be right back with Part 2.